In the late 1990s and early 2000s, Black Isle Studio was the crown jewel of computer role-playing games. They'd given us Baldur's Gate, Planescape Torment, and the first 2 Fallout games. And by 2003, they were working on what should have been their magnum opus, Fallout 3, codename Van Buren. It was ambitious, innovative, and by all accounts shaping up to be amazing. And then the game got cut. Today, we'll be diving into one of gaming's most fascinating what-if stories, the cancelled Fallout 3 that almost was, how it was developed through tabletop campaigns in the back rooms of Black Isle, and how the ghost of this game would influence the Fallout franchise for years to come. After Fallout 2 shipped in 1998, Black Isle Studio immediately wanted to make a Fallout 3. The industry at that time was shifting towards 3D games, and they knew they either had to evolve or die. But there was one massive problem. They had never made a 3D game before, and the concept was very new to them. So they licensed the Numeric Design Limited game engine, which was built from the same technology that would later become the Gamebryo game engine, aka the one that Bethesda used to make Fallout 3. That's a funny full circle moment. And the Black Isle programmers started learning 3D development from scratch, while also trying to finish Planescape Torment, one of the most ambitious CRPGs ever made. But development crawled, and every day was a struggle, with the team split between the multiple projects and learning new tools, fighting with unfamiliar technology, and facing financial pressures. The game's director, Fergus Urquhart, suggested redirecting resources towards a safer project using the Infinity engine that they already knew, and this was how the first Fallout 3 was cancelled. Very little is known about this original Fallout 3 project, including how much it ultimately influenced Van Buren. But for one designer, this wasn't the end. For him, this was only the beginning. Chris Avellone wasn't ready to give up on Fallout 3. If he couldn't make it as a video game, then he'd make it as a tabletop. In his spare time, he created a Fallout pen and paper RPG and invited Black Isle employees to play. But what Chris Avellone decided to do with this was both genius and would set the stage for the game yet to come. He ran 2 separate campaigns simultaneously, with different groups of players on each team, and neither one of them knowing that their actions were affecting the other's campaign. Choices made by one group would ripple into the other game. NPCs would disappear or change allegiances, locations would be destroyed or saved based on the player's decisions, and it was this emergent storytelling that made it so special. Players explored locations Avellone invented: the Boulder Dome, Hoover Dam, Denver overrun by dogs, and the prison. They encountered factions he created like Caesar's Legion or the Daughters of Hecate, and met characters along the way that would become legendary like Joshua Graham, Arcade Gannon, and Christine Royce. Everything that happened in those campaigns, the locations, the characters, the storyline, the player choices, Avellone documented them all meticulously because he knew eventually Black Isle would get another shot at Fallout 3, and when they did, he would have the blueprint ready. During this time, the team were also working on the Fallout Bible, a comprehensive document designed to consolidate all of the series' lore, timelines, factions, and world-building rules. It acted as a canonical reference for writers and designers, ensuring that future Fallout projects could stay consistent within the established universe. While Avallone's tabletop campaigns explored the emergent stories and player-driven chaos, the Fallout Bible provided a backbone of lore that would guide Black Isle and later developers when creating Van Buren, Fallout New Vegas, and beyond. Nearly all of Van Buren's content came directly from these tabletop games, but this is just the start of the story. Black Isle got another opportunity to develop Fallout 3, and this time they were ready. They codenamed the project Van Buren, following their tradition of using US presidential codenames. Martin Van Buren, the 8th president of the United States, and a historical figure that most people tend to forget, which is kind of fitting seeing as what would happen with the game. This time they had a better plan. Black Isle had developed a new 3D engine for another project, Baldur's Gate 3, The Black Hound. But that game was cancelled, but they did still have the engine, which they were able to repurpose. The Jefferson Engine was fully 3D, but it maintained Fallout's classic isometric perspective, which was iconic for the game at the time. It could handle 1600 by 1200 resolution, and boasted a lot of advanced features for the time, like volumetric shadows, dynamic per-pixel lighting, and character models that ran about 1,000 polygons each, with 180 animations per character. This was revolutionary, but most importantly, the team actually knew how to use it this time. During pre-production, he drafted the majority of the locations: Circle Junction, Fort Abandon, Big Empty, Boulder Dome, Denver, Hoover Dam, Mesa Verde, and more. He also created the primary antagonist of this game, Dr. Victor Prespa, along with key characters like Joshua Graham, but this version of the character is much different. Check out my short on that to see how. But it was at this point in late 2002 that the unfinished Baldur's Gate game was cancelled. It was a devastating blow to Black Isle. And it was at this point that Chris Avellone, frustrated with Interplay's mismanagement and studio direction, decided to resign. Josh Sawyer, who had been the lead technical designer up until this point, was promoted to lead, and Sawyer took Avallone's extensive documentation and worked to focus the project, making it more achievable and trying to refine the systems as much as he could. He completely overhauled the special character system, consolidating all ranged weapons into a single firearm skill, splitting speech into deception and persuasion, which actually I think is quite a cool idea, and fixing the balancing issues that had plagued Fallout 4. And fixing the balancing issues that plagued Fallout 2. He also gave Caesar's Legion its iconic Roman-inspired design, writing detailed design documents for locations like New Canaan and Buren Springs. Van Buren was becoming more than just Avallone's vision, turning into a true creative effort, but the clock was ticking. At this point, Interplay are going down, badly. The late 90s and early 2000s were brutal for PC-focused publishers. Development costs skyrocketed, and the industry was shifting towards consoles, a market in which Interplay had almost no expertise. Despite releasing critically acclaimed games, the company was hemorrhaging money. Journalist Kat Bailey later attributed Interplay's troubles to increased development costs and their inability to adapt to console gaming. In 1998, Interplay went public just to avoid bankruptcy, but it didn't help. Losses just kept mounting. In 1999, French company Titus Interactive invested in Interplay, eventually gaining majority control by 2001. Brian Fargo, Interplay's founder and CEO, resigned in January of 2002 over conflict with Titus. Titus installed Herve Kane as their new CEO, and Kane began making unpopular but arguably necessary decisions, slashing costs, cancelling projects, in a desperate attempt to keep the company afloat. Interplay's shares were delisted from the Nasdaq in 2002 due to low prices, and in September of 2003 they got into a lawsuit with Vivendi Universal, ending their North American distribution deal. The company was dealing with unpaid royalty to developers, unpaid employee wages. It was a catastrophe. Tim Kaine, the original creator of Fallout, revealed the final chapter of the story in a YouTube video. After leaving Interplay to co-found Troika Games, he was invited back in 2003 by Interplay vice president. They wanted him to play Van Buren's prototype and assess how long it would take to finish. Kaine played the game for about 2 hours. He talked to the development team, he looked at the engine, the asset, the design documents, and gave an honest assessment.
So I asked a lot of questions. I probably played it for about 2 hours. And then the Veep came in, they left, and the Veep came in, and he basically said, I have one question for you. How long do you think it would take the team to complete this game and make it shippable? Now, I knew a lot of the team. I hadn't worked there in 5 years, but I knew a lot of the people who were working on this. I knew how many people were on the team. I knew what they were good at. And I had just seen the entirety of the game they had put together and where the state it was in. And I said, I'm convinced in 18 months you could have a really good game shipped. And he said, could it be done any faster? And I was like, oh shoot, I've said too long. And I said, well, even if you did a Death March crunch, I don't think you could do it faster than 12. And then you'd be shipping something that was unbalanced and buggy, and the team would be destroyed. So I don't recommend that. And he said, okay, thanks. As we walked out, he basically explained that any answer over 6 months was going to result in him having to cancel it. Meaning the answer I just gave got the game canceled.
Interplay didn't have the money. That was it. They could fund at most 6 months of development, maybe. Not a year, and definitely not 18 months. The game's quality didn't matter. The team's talent didn't matter. The only thing that mattered was money that Interplay didn't have. And it was at this point that everybody knew that Van Buren was dead. They were just waiting for the body to drop. Josh Sawyer resigned from Black Isle on November 11, 2003, citing continued mismanagement from Interplay. He saw the writing on the wall, and less than a month later, on December 8, 2003, Interplay made it official. Black Isle Studio was shut down entirely. Every employee was laid off, and Van Buren was finally cancelled. According to developer John Daly, the engine was almost done. Most of the dialogue was completed, and at least half the maps were finished. He believed that the team could have made the deadline. Damien Folletto estimated at most 8 months of production remained, but Sean K. Reynolds had a more pessimistic view. He thought that the game needed at least a year of design work. Josh Sawyer later stated that the game had been in active development for around 6 months before cancellation. 6 months of work, 12 to 18 months needed, it was never going to happen. Fergus Urquhart later stated, "We did fine. Our product made lots of money, and internally, the BioWare stuff made even more money. It was great, Black Isle. We were doing well. The studio was profitable, the games were successful, but it didn't matter. Interplay's overall financial situation made it impossible to continue." Here's what makes the story even more bitter. Van Buren's cancellation was primarily financial. Interplay was collapsing under the mountains of debt, but Titus Interaction had pushed for a console-focused strategy, and in this context, a different Fallout project fit their category better. And if you already know the timeline of Fallout, I think you know what game I'm going to talk about. Fallout Brotherhood of Steel. Brotherhood of Steel was a console action game developed with minimal Black Isle input. It featured a heavy metal soundtrack with bands like Slipknot and Killswitch Engage, overtly sexualized female characters, fast-paced hack-and-slash combat, everything that hardcore Fallout fans had feared. A dumbed-down, action-focused console cash grab that abandoned the series' retro-futuristic aesthetic and deep RPG mechanics. The game was announced in March of 2003 and released in January 2004, 1 month after Van Buren's cancellation. Received mixed reviews and sold poorly. So poorly that his planned sequel Fallout Brotherhood of Steel 2 was also cancelled, which, even by judging the game's reception today, was probably for the best. After the layoffs, former Black Isle employees regrouped. Fergus Urquhart, Chris Avellone, Josh Sawyer, and later Tim Kaine founded Obsidian Entertainment. They would get their chance to work on Fallout again, but not yet. Interplay continued its death spiral. In June 2004, California labor investigations forcibly shut down Interplay's office over unpaid royalties and employee wages. On the same day, Titus Interactive announced they were declaring bankruptcy. By 2005, Titus officially closed, leaving Interplay buried under even more debt, somehow. In 2004, Interplay auctioned the Fallout license to Bethesda Softworks for $1.175 million. And in April 2007, Bethesda purchased the full rights to the intellectual property for $5.75 million, again, dollars. The Fallout series would continue, but in very different hands, with a very different vision. Bethesda released Fallout 3 in 2008, a first-person RPG set in Washington, D.C., completely unrelated to Van Buren. It became a massive commercial success, though many classic Fallout fans saw it as a betrayal of the series' roots. But in 2010, Bethesda did something very interesting. They contracted Obsidian Entertainment to develop Fallout New Vegas, and suddenly, Van Buren rose from its grave. Van Buren could have disappeared completely. When Bethesda acquired the Fallout IP, Pete Hines made it clear, releasing someone else's unfinished product or assets from it is not something we intend to do. But in 2005 and 2006, extensive design documents, hundreds of pages, leaked to the Fallout fan site No Mutants Allowed. Complete location designs, character backgrounds, quest structures, technical specifications. It was the blueprint for Van Buren, or at least what it would have been. Then on April 30th, 2007, No Mutants Allowed released screenshots and video of Van Buren's tech demo. 2 days later, on May 2nd, they released the full playable demo, a 241 megabyte file containing the pre-alpha build from 2003. It's also obviously what I used for footage for this game, so I'll leave a link in the description if you want to try play it yourself. The demo was buggy, it crashed constantly, combat was barely implemented, but it was playable, and it proved the Jefferson Engine worked. But most importantly, it gave fans a glimpse of what could have been. When Obsidian developed Fallout New Vegas, they resurrected Van Buren piece by piece. Caesar's Legion made its full debut, Joshua Graham became the Burned Man in the Honest Hearts DLC, Hoover Dam became the focal point for the main story, Big Empty appeared in Old World Blues, and characters like Arcade Gannon and Christine Royce appeared as companions. New Vegas is beloved precisely because it carries Black Isle's spirit, prioritizing player choice, moral ambiguity, and consequence. It's not trying to be Bethesda's version of Fallout 3, it's trying to be the faithful sequel to Fallout 2 that Van Buren never was. And the fans hadn't given up either. Project Van Buren, led by developer Adam Lacko, is recreating the game in Unity. Fallout Yesterday uses the Fallout 2 engine to bring Van Buren's content to life. And it's these projects that prove Van Buren's legacy extends beyond just influencing New Vegas. People care enough about this cancelled game to spend years, decades trying to finish what Black Isle had started. And nothing but my hats off to these people. Again, full links to all of their stuff in the description. Honestly, the work they're doing is amazing. And that's the full development cycle of Fallout Van Buren. Thank you so much for watching. Honestly, it was really fun making this video. I know that there are a few other videos talking about Van Buren, and honestly, it's those videos that made me really want to do a deep dive into Van Buren, both in the development cycle and the actual content of the game itself, which I also plan on making another video purely on. So if you guys do want to see that, make sure to let me know. And yeah, thank you for watching.